Hello. Well, when I did the original garden tour back in January, I mentioned that these two beds had been left out of our renovations because we had a little project plan for those. Now, when we renovated the garden, we lost our big polytunnel. Now, we've got plenty of undercover space with the greenhouses, but the polytunnel gives us a different sort of environment, and we've been missing that. So our plan for these two beds is to put up a new tunnel, obviously a rather small one. These beds happen to be 10 feet wide from the far side to the near side, and just over 14 feet long. So a 10 by 15 polytunnel should sit over these quite nicely. We've got some of the metal poles there that you can see in the picture, and under the tarp we've got the rest of the stuff boxed up. So that's our Easter project. Now, there are two ways to go with a polytunnel. You can put up the sort where you have to trench around it and bury the polythene, and if you're fit and healthy, that's a fine way to do it because that is the cheapest route. But I'm not particularly fit and healthy, so we've gone for the easier sort to build. So with that polytunnel, we don't need to do any of the trenching. It's all metal. There's no woodwork at all. The door frames are metal, and usually they will be made out of timber. But I really like the idea of an all metal construction so that we're going to get lots of years of maintenance-free use. But it comes with aluminium base rails and some clips to fix the polythene. So there shouldn't need to be too much heavy work here. All we need to do is put in some ground anchors. Now, they should screw in. Our ground is a little bit stony, so I'm a little bit worried about those, but we should be able to screw in the ground anchors, assemble the frame, and everything else should be fairly straightforward. So the first job is to brush back all of the gravel that we've got around these beds and clear the way for getting those posts in the ground. So we managed to make a little bit of progress yesterday. We've got these tubes in place now. These ground anchors, they just screw into position, and that sounds really easy, but the job of laying out the four corners is a bit of a pain because you've got to make sure everything's square, measuring the diagonals and so on. So it's quite a fiddly process to get that right. And then as soon as you start screwing these in, they hit a stone or something, and that shies the post out of position. So these were a bit of a nightmare, to be honest, but that's probably because our ground here is a bit on the stony side, and maybe on reflection it would have been easier if I'd just used some of the tubes that you concrete into position. But anyway, they're in place now, and the next job is to get the frame up, and that shouldn't take too long. So today we've managed to get the polytunnel frame in place, and with the bracing and the extra ridge bars, this is now a pretty solid structure. So we've got some extra crop bars across the width. I'm not sure whether we're going to put those to use yet or not, but I like to have them anyway. And then we've got two sets of extra ridge poles. Now, we're almost certainly going to be growing tomatoes down both sides of the tunnel. So before we put the cover on, we will fasten in place some bamboo canes here. It's much easier to do without the cover on, less danger of sticking a hole in it. So we'll fix some canes in place. The next job is to dig some holes to take the posts for the door frames, get the door frames in place. We've got a door at each end. We chose not to have ventilation down the sides on this tunnel, but we've got two sliding doors so that we can open the ends of the tunnel up and get some breeze through. So we need to fix those frames in place, and then we can tighten up all the base rails, and the frame is basically finished. We can't cover it quite yet because we need to put some wood in here to contain the soil. The level of the soil is a little bit higher in here than outside because this was one of our beds, and we'll put some timber around the base, partly to contain the soil, but also to prevent us accidentally stabbing a tool through the cover. So that's tomorrow's job. So with the frame in place, we've turned our attention to the arrangement of beds. Now, we dropped this frame over 2 of our old veg beds, so the soil in those isn't bad. It's been a little bit compacted where we've been walking all over it, but nothing serious. The soil in here is fine. What's not great though is the path. As I've said in a few of the previous videos, our soil here can become very compact indeed. It's very difficult to dig in the in uncultivated ground here. So we've got a lot of stone. In fact, we're surrounded by old gravel pits. They're lakes now, but that gives you an idea of just how much stone there can be in this soil. And it's quite sandy and silty. It's got just about the right combination of particles to compact down quite hard. So originally we were just going to have the 2 beds, one on each side, and then I thought, well, I don't want to waste the amount of ground at the back of the tunnel. We might as well have a U-shape arrangement. And then that bit at the back came creeping more and more towards the front, and in the end we just decided we're not going to have any arrangement of beds. We've put 1 slab at the entrance to the tunnel, and that's the only bit that won't be worked. Now, we may decide not to grow anything down the center, or then we may plant up. In our old tunnel we used to grow our earliest crop of sweet corn in the tunnel, and I want to put that sort of in the center towards the back of this one this year. So I'm sure we will grow stuff over that area where the path was. So we've got to do some work on this path because at the moment we can barely get a fork in the ground. So we've just put some timber edging all the way around. That will contain any soil and compost. And here is our problem, in that this is absolutely rock solid. You can barely get a fork into the ground here. So this here, which was cultivated before, that's no problem at all. That just needs just a little bit of forking over, I think, and that will loosen that up a treat. But this is not good. You can't really plant into this. Roots don't want to get down into it. It's sufficiently hard to be a bit of a problem. So what we're doing here is we're just taking out the top foot or so, and here I've broken up the ground down the bottom. This is lovely now. I can get a fork into it. And the soil we've taken out, we've actually sieved it. So I knocked up this sieve last autumn when we were preparing the raspberry bed, because that also needed to be sieved out, and it's just made with some coarse mesh. So small stones will go through this, but these larger ones won't, and I think that's fine. Small stones are not a problem at all. They can be quite beneficial for the structure of the soil, but we don't want large stones in there. It makes it very difficult to dig and plant in the soil. And you can see here the sort of things that we're removing. We really don't want that in the top, I don't know, 8 to 12 inches of the soil. That's this isn't good to have in the ground. So having broken up this soil, we can then put some organic matter in there. This is horse compost. Just spread that along the base. Now we don't normally do this, we normally just spread our composts and manures on the surface, and we don't do much digging, but just this once in preparation for cultivating this strip, this is how we're preparing it. I can then rake in some of the sieved soil, and we can top this off. Once that's finished, we will break up any compacted soil across the rest of the polytunnel, and we'll put some more organic matter on top, and then just give that a light forking over. So this is quite a job, and it's something we've had to do in quite a few places in the garden. So most of our vegetable beds have been treated this way. There are all sorts of things that we could have grown without doing it, but there are some things that I think wouldn't like it at all. The carrots and the parsnips, for example, growing in ground that's so hard and stony, we wouldn't get any good roots at all. So I think it's worked well in other places, and I'm sure it'll be fine in here once we've finished. We are so exhausted now, but the job is done, and it is well past gin o'clock, so we are packing up and heading indoors. This is all prepared now, ready for planting. Those slabs there are temporary, and if we decide that we really want to keep them, or we decide on a final layout in here, I may well dig out the soil and drop some concrete in underneath those and give them a proper firm base, but they will do for now. So only two jobs left for this. One is to get the cover on. So today would have been perfect because there's very little wind, but we'll have to wait for another suitable day to get the cover on. And then I've got to do the sliding doors. So we've got doors at both ends, and that's going to give us nice ventilation. But that is definitely it for today. Before I go, just a quick look at the stones we dragged out of the path area. Now, we've only got the large stones there. All the small ones will go through that sieve, but you can see there's quite a lot there, so I think it was probably well worth taking those out. Well, it took a while, but the polytunnel is finally finished, or more or less. There's a little bit of tidying up I want to do around the outside. Now, to be honest, I think I could have done a bit of a better job of getting the cover on. It really is a bit of a faff with this sort of tunnel. It's fixed with this kind of wiggle wire, and it's a fiddly pain. And I think if I did this again, I would probably achieve a better job on the cover, but I really don't have either the time or the will to take that cover off and have another go at it. So that's how it's going to be for the next 5, 6, 7 years, however long that cover lasts. So yeah, I don't think the tomatoes and other crops are going to care. It's going to keep the weather out and the warmth in, and that's its main purpose. So apart from feeling that maybe I could have done a slightly better job of covering it, I'm pretty happy with the result. So let's take a quick look inside. Whew. Well, it's a pretty warm and sunny day today, so it's really toasty in here, and of course when we are growing things in here, I'll have both of the doors probably open most of the time to get some ventilation through here. So I've set out some canes along the side. These are just tie wrapped to the bars here, and these are going to support our tomatoes. Now, they're not quite vertical, those canes, but it's perfectly all right to have them at a bit of an angle. The tomatoes don't care. So we've got 8 along each side, and they will definitely have tomatoes, and there's a couple of canes each side of the door either end, so they might also get tomatoes. because I was grafting my own plants this year, I sowed lots of seed, so I've got plenty of plants, so I could entirely fill this polytunnel, and well, I wouldn't mind doing that actually, but I've got a few other plants I want to get in here as well. Along the ground here, I've just laid out a soaker hose. I'm not sure if 4 runs is enough. I might have to go to 5 or make some other adjustments with this later, but that is probably enough to cover sort of day-to-day water requirements. So I've got a feed coming in here from our main water supply. I've got this splitter on here, and one end goes to a normal hose, and then I've got a timer here that I can use to automatically switch on and off the soaker hose. So hopefully that's going to help save a little bit of time and make sure that the tomatoes don't accidentally dry out, because consistent watering with tomatoes is quite important, especially for avoiding things like blossom end rot. So the soaker hose is going to be dead handy for maintaining the moisture levels. So I know I could have done a kind of full build video for the polytunnel, but to be honest, that's not going to be of much interest unless somebody happens to be putting up this particular type of tunnel, and it would mostly consist of me cursing when I'm making a bit of a mess of it. So I decided that it probably didn't make sense to do a full build video on this tunnel. But anyway, hopefully you've had a little flavour of the process with these shorter clips. But anyway, that is all for this video. You'll get to see the tunnel a lot more throughout the season, and hopefully it's going to serve us well, filled with tomatoes, aubergines, maybe some sweet corn and some French beans, and other crops that are going to enjoy the warmth in here. So anyway, that is all for this video. So thank you ever so much for watching, and bye for now.